Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. Today we examine three critical relationships: India-Pakistan, India-China, and India and the United States of America. Where do we stand on each of them? My guest is India's former Foreign Secretary and a gentleman whose understanding and analysis of Indian foreign policy is unsurpassed, Shyam Saran. Mr. Saran, let's start with India-Pakistan. How do you view last month's reconfirmation of the 2003 ceasefire? Do you see it simply as the restoration of peace and tranquility on the border? Or is there a sense in which this might also be an attempt to take a first step towards re-engagement?
Well, I certainly hope it is the latter. You have heard me say before that irrespective of whatever pending issues there may be between India and Pakistan, it does make sense for them to have this ceasefire, because most of all it has been very damaging for the populations living along the line of control and the border, both on the Pakistani side as well as the Indian side. And if you recall a conversation we had where I said that, if we are having this kind of a tit-for-tat escalation, you up the ante, the other side also responds in the same way. Neither side seem to be changing the calculus on in the capitals, both in Pakistan and India. So from that point of view, I think this is certainly a positive.
There's no doubt that this reconfirmation of the ceasefire makes good sense from both points of view.
That's right.
But how do you explain the timing? It took everyone by surprise. Why did it happen now?
Well, I think I understand that maybe back-channel conversations were already taking place for the last several months. But
when you say you understand, you've been told that...
No, I have not been told. I mean, this is just a sort of a report that I have, that maybe this was the result of some conversations that had been going on. So this is not a technical military decision alone. I mean, there is a political sanction behind it from both sides. Now, why it happened at this particular point of time, I think one, I related to the fact that you have also a problem on the border with China. We have talked about a two-front war, and certainly it makes eminent sense that you try and keep at least one flank as tranquil as possible, so that you can concentrate attention on the other more difficult front.
So you're suggesting that at the back of the mind of those who make policy in Delhi was a realization over the last year that a hostile two-front situation is one we don't want to have continue.
I would assume so.
And China being the greater threat, it makes sense to engage with Pakistan.
Certainly. I mean, engage, if not to resolve problems with Pakistan, but as I said, if you are able to keep the border on the Pakistani side relatively tranquil, it helps you deal with the other more pressing challenge.
Let me quote to you what Ned Price, the State Department spokesperson, said on the 26th of February, the very day after the two DGMOs had announced their agreement. His words were, "We had called on the parties to reduce tension along the line of control by returning to that 2003 ceasefire agreement." Does that suggest or hint that the Biden administration had a role to play?
It could, because from the language that you are quoting, it would appear that perhaps there have been some conversations with the United States as well. And given the fact that the United States is so much focused at this point of time in trying to seek a honorable exit from Afghanistan, and they believe that Pakistan is such an important part of that story, ensuring that the India-Pakistan border remains more peaceful would be helpful in that
So it's possible
respect.
that the Biden administration nudged both countries to come to a sensible reaffirmation of the old ceasefire.
Well, I don't know whether they would have nudged, but I can certainly see an American interest
In doing so. Now, as I pointed out, this is an agreement that was reached by the Directors General of Military Operations of both sides. And the agreement also goes on to talk about the very important point that it's time, sorry, I'm getting it wrong, each other's core issues and concerns need to be addressed. And 3 weeks before this, General Bajwa, the Pakistani army chief had spoken and said it's time to extend a hand of peace in all directions. Pakistan and India must resolve the long-standing issue of Jammu and Kashmir in a dignified and peaceful manner. Do you get the feeling from that the Pakistan army supports this reaffirmation of the ceasefire? And secondly, General Bajwa has come around to believing improved relations are in Pakistan's interest.
Well, this could not have taken place, obviously, without the sanction of the Pakistani army. How can you have a ceasefire if the Pakistani army is not on board? So that is a given. Now, what could be the calculation on the Pakistani side? I would again point to the fact that one has noticed over a period of time that there is a certain degree of discomfort in Pakistan with its over-dependence upon China. And you know, even on the CPEC, which is a flagship project for China, there have been considerable issues cropping up every now and then. Just a short while ago, you may have seen a Chinese demand that there should be some kind of a joint parliamentary committee which should be actually monitoring this, which is like a no confidence in the present government. So there is a sense of discomfort, and I think what this does is to also, in a sense, not want to be seen merely as a kind of a Chinese pawn or a Chinese cat's paw as far as this region is concerned. So from that point of view, it does make sense to have this kind of a limited engagement with India.
Pakistan wanted to increase space.
Yes.
It needed to suggest to the world its dependence on China is less than it looks.
Right. That's right. I mean, this is speculative, but that is what makes sense.
So in a very important sense, this was an opportune moment for both sides.
That's right.
The Chinese pressure on India made us re-evaluate our relationship with
Whether
Pakistan, and similarly so Pakistan's relationship with China made them change their view.
And whether it is only tactical on both sides remains to be seen. I hope it is not just tactical, but that it is a start of a, even if it's a limited process of perhaps the two sides being more engaged than they have been over the last.
Let's take up this question. Is it tactical, or could it be the beginning of something that is more strategic? I noticed one thing, that both sides made very important omissions when they responded to the DGMO press release. For instance, the Indian spokesman did not say talks and terror can't go together, which has been India's traditional position under Mr. Modi. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan, who tweeted extensively, did not say that talks with India cannot happen until
Before
India undoes the loss of autonomy in Jammu and Kashmir. And that's his position for the last 2 years.
Quite right.
In your eyes, how significant is this mutual omission?
Well, I mean, it doesn't mean that those positions have now completely been abandoned because they can resurface.
But they've been set aside.
Yes, in this particular instance. But one of the I think notable things is that you remember when the Gujarat elections were taking place, how much of Pakistan was drummed up each time as a issue in domestic politics during the election campaign. What is very interesting for me is that this time around, when there are very, very fiercely contested state elections coming up, you will notice that there is hardly any, in fact, mention of Pakistan.
And that has to be deliberate.
It cannot but be deliberate. So there is a change. I mean, there seems to be a conscious decision by the leadership here that keep that muted because there is a process perhaps being envisaged of re-engagement with Pakistan, where this may not be helpful. So this has not been perhaps picked up, but I think you will agree with me that there has been a sharp contrast with what we have seen.
Absolutely.
before.
And this brings to my mind what Salman Bashir, a former Pakistan Foreign Secretary, a former Pakistan High Commissioner to India, said to me last week when we were talking about he said the key question in his mind is it purely expediency on India's part because of the situation they face vis-a-vis China, vis-a-vis Kashmir or whatever, or is there the beginning of some sort of rethinking about Pakistan? This deliberate not use of Pakistan as a bogey in the elections. The fact that we are beginning to reconsider the threat from Pakistan in the light of the bigger threat from China could suggest not a change of heart, but a slight rethink, a slight strategic rethink.
A slight rethink, and it has a certain logic to it. Now, it's not necessarily that because it has logic, it necessarily, is the calculation as far as this leadership is concerned.
But because it has logic, it
to
could go
me,
further.
this is quite striking because I had expected, frankly speaking, that in this election campaign we will see, because this is a kind of a very, like it has proved to be a kind of a winning card. In the past. So if you have refrained from using it, then it suggests that maybe there is some other calculation. Now, whether it will last, I don't know, but there could also be a calculation that, the summer is coming, the passes will be open. Is this way of trying to keep the situation in Jammu and Kashmir perhaps more peaceful and with less violence than would otherwise be the case? That could be also a prelude to maybe taking a few smaller steps. You have heard reports that at a certain point of time, the government may consider restoration of statehood to Jammu and Kashmir. Could this be perhaps a means of trying to see whether we can open the door to that?
In other words, lessening the tension with Pakistan also gives Mr. Modi space for anything he plans to do domestically in Kashmir.
That's right.
It gives him a chance.
That would also have, if they are able to do that, that would also have a positive international impact.
Absolutely. So, in fact, what's happened vis-a-vis India and Pakistan, this reaffirmation of the ceasefire, not only has, how shall I put it, links with the Biden administration, links with the Chinese situation, links also with India's own domestic politics, because it's not coming up as an electoral issue, and it might create space for Mr. Modi to do something if he's thinking of it in Kashmir.
Yes, it could. Yeah, I mean that could be the calculation. So maybe not entirely sort of tactical, but perhaps with some
a little bit more
additional moves, perhaps being there.
Now, as we speak, Mr. Saran, it's almost exactly 2 weeks since the DGMO agreement was made public. And all the newspaper reports are showing that both sides have scrupulously observed the ceasefire since then. I don't think there's been a single reported violation at all.
That's right.
That being the case, so far, that being the case, should we also begin considering what steps hereafter? Are there some that could be considered? Small fledgling steps to keep the process going?
As I mentioned, the restoration of statehood to Jammu and Kashmir, which is already something which this government is committed to, could in a sense partially respond to the Pakistani concern. I mean, one could see that Pakistan could say, okay, this is a step forward. Even if it is not a reversal, it is a step forward. So that could be a positive effort. You could also have, even at the time of great tension, you had the Kartarpur corridor, which was inaugurated. Perhaps with respect to some of those kind of people-to-people engagement, perhaps that could be.
Is this a moment to consider restoring high commissioners, or would that be premature?
That could certainly be one of the steps. At what stage, I would not want to speculate.
But as tensions come down, it becomes a possibility.
Yes, certainly.
And you think that this is the sort of thinking that would be going on in South Bloc?
Well, I again, I have no evidence for that, but I mean, in terms of what could be the dynamic in this kind of situation, this is what one should perhaps expect.
Now, this is a long way down the road, but if in fact this process is going to mature and grow, then at some point the two key issues of Kashmir and terror would have to be discussed. I don't imagine for a moment that it's going to happen in the foreseeable immediate future, but whenever they are, from past experience, would it make sense to discuss them on a back channel rather than publicly, and therefore subject them to media glare and political scrutiny?
Well, we have seen that back channel talks have been perhaps more in terms of outcome. They have been perhaps more efficacious than public.
You're talking of Tariq Aziz, Sati Lamba.
Yes. Yeah. So I would say yes, if that possibility exists, why not? But there, with India-Pakistan relations, there are always many a slip between the cup and the lip, and we have seen where such promising kind of developments then have been completely derailed by some major terrorist attack
But
along
we
the
also
border.
have experience of how back channels can actually lead to reasonably good outcomes. One
Yes.
presumes that the ceasefire that's
as
been
long
reaffirmed.
as long as our expectations are limited, are modest, yes, certainly this
And
would help.
if it's true that back channel contacts brought about the reaffirmation of the 2003 ceasefire, then back channels clearly can be productive because they allow the governments to talk without being subject
Quite
to
right.
media scrutiny.
No doubt about that. But a great deal, as I said, depends upon what the intent on both sides is. And my experience has been that every time that there has been a possibility of some significant sort of a breakthrough or some significant relaxation of tensions, there are interests certainly on the Pakistani side which always act to try and derail it.
That's what we have to guard against.
That is a pattern which I think I would not say that that is no longer the case. We should expect that.
Absolutely. We have to guard against
Yes.
the unforeseen, unpredictable event of a terror attack.
That's right.
That can scupper
I
everything.
don't think it is so unforeseen because it has been foreseen in the past.
But unpredictable it is.
But yes, when it would occur, that's a different issue. But I don't think that particular sort of policy, state policy of cross-border terrorism as a means of overcoming what Pakistan regards as an asymmetrical situation between the two sides. I do not see evidence that Pakistan has actually abandoned that particular.
Let's come to the second critical relationship I want to discuss with you, India-China. It's almost exactly a month since the two countries agreed to disengage and withdraw on both banks of Pangong Lake. But there's been no disengagement on hot springs in Gogra, at Depsang, at Demchuk. Does that suggest to you, after this lapse of 30 days, that perhaps the process has stalled?
Well, Karan, you must accept that this is a complex process, a difficult process. And even what happened in the Pangong Lake area, after all, was after several rounds of talks between the two sides.
But people thought once it had started, it would go very fast.
Well, not necessarily, because the situation is not quite the same at the other areas of confrontation.
Even hot springs and Gogra?
Particularly with respect to Depsang.
But hot springs and Gogra, presumably one thought would be more easily
Well,
handled.
yes, they could be, but I think the fact is that the situation may not exactly be the same as Pangong, and this doesn't mean that the both sides will not be able to come to agreement on those other areas.
Let me quote.
But I would say that there is I think merit in being somewhat patient and not come to a conclusion immediately.
Let me quote to you at that point what the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi said at a press conference on Sunday. That's literally just 4 days ago. His words were, "The boundary dispute, an issue left over from history, is not the whole story of the China-India relationship." And he also spoke of the need to create enabling conditions for the settlement of the boundary dispute. What does that suggest to you about China's attitude to the remaining disengagement?
Well, this is a standard Chinese position. So he is not saying something which is different from before or a departure from the past. This is China's stated position with respect to the boundary issue. I think what he is trying to point to is the assertion on the Indian side that China should not expect that other components of the relationship can somehow or the other be insulated from what is happening at the border. Because that is the Chinese position and has been for some
Absolutely.
time that, don't affect the economic and commercial
And
relationship.
if China is taking that position again at this point of time, don't let the economic, the trade and the other relationships suffer because of the problem on the border, does it suggest to you that perhaps China is reluctant to disengage from the other areas like Hot Spring, Gogra, Depsang, Demchok, and therefore we've reached a sort of impasse?
I don't think so, because even on the economic and commercial issue, if you see that immediately after this disengagement was announced, there was some limited opening up again of the economic and trade relationship. So, for example, there was a pending proposal by a Chinese motor vehicle company to take over the GM plant in India, and that had been held up. And I understand that that has been now been cleared. So, some pending proposals have been allowed to go through. The investment proposals have been. So, I think if the indication was to be given to China that, look, if you deliver on this, there could also be a positive impact on other aspects of the relationship. I think that message.
But you don't think that the position has stalled? You do believe?
No, I do not. I would not say that the position is stalled. I would say that this is a very complex negotiation. Where you are trying to work out scheduling, you are trying to work out sequencing. So, I am not that surprised that just one round has taken place immediately after the Pangkong Lake disengagement.
That was almost
give it a
4
little
weeks
more
ago.
time. Yes,
that was
sure,
almost 4 weeks
sure,
ago.
Sure.
I mean, a whole month has gone by without any further disengagement.
Well, I'm still hopeful that this process will continue, because it is so much patently in the interest of both sides to resolve.
But you're also suggesting that the process to achieve full and satisfactory disengagement, and remember, thereafter there's also de-escalation. We want troops to go back to their base units, not simply disengage. That whole process of disengagement and de-escalation is not going to be easy. It's going to require time. It's going to require patience.
Yes, sure.
In which case, how do you see the India-China relationship 6 months and 1 year down the road?
I think you might have heard several people who are familiar with India-China relations and China itself. There is no going back to square one, in a sense.
That door is closed.
That door is closed. You have to find a new basis or new equilibrium in the relationship. Now, that will, number one, mean that first of all, you have to get over the current confrontation. And secondly, then I think both sides have to really sit down together and work out, what is the basis on which they want to take this relationship forward.
It sounds as if you're saying that there will be question marks about the nature of the relationship we forge for quite a while to come.
Yes. I don't think one can escape from that.
We'll be feeling our way over the next year.
Yes. And maybe the Chinese too, because many of their calculations perhaps have not been borne out.
Except in our case, how we feel our way over the next year depends very much on what China does and how China responds.
Yes, it does. And also, it depends upon, it's not just an India-China equation, it also is linked together.
Absolutely.
With other important relationships.
And that's why the third relationship I want to discuss with you is that critical one between India and the United States. But before I come to that, let me one more time go back to what the Chinese foreign minister said at that press conference on Sunday. He said, China and India are each other's friends and partners, not threats or rivals. The two sides need to help each other succeed instead of undercutting each other. We should intensify cooperation instead of harboring suspicions of each other. Is that an attempt at reaching out, or is this misleading rhetoric?
Well, unless it is backed by specific actions or gestures on the Chinese side, these will remain only words. So, I think the first order of business really is that if the two sides have really come to an agreement to disengage along the line of actual control, then the sooner they achieve that, the more favorable the situation will be for perhaps reconstructing the relationship, because there is little doubt that trust has been broken. And trust is something which will take time to re-establish. It is not something that merely because China is saying we want to be friends and the Indian side says yes, we want to be friends as well, that's the end of the story.
So you're saying India can only believe these sentiments which I've just quoted once China actually gets out of Hot Springs, Gogra, Depsang, Demchok. And even then, to believe these words after that de-escalation, we would still have to establish trust.
Well, you will have to be on your guard because you have been taken by surprise. So, even if disengagement were achieved, you would still need to be on your guard that there is no sudden some kind of a surprise.
And that
for
means
you.
the onus is on China to give us reasons to believe we can trust them again.
Well, let me put it this way. I think both sides, number one, have to successfully conclude this, process of disengagement, and then also begin the process of re-engaging and seeing the ways in which the mutual trust which has been broken is in some way restored. Because don't forget, we are talking about a process which has been in play for the last several decades.
And because it was China that transgressed onto
Yes.
territory that we believe is
Yes.
Indian,
So
and
it
it's
is-
China that broke the agreement, is not the onus more on them to establish trust?
Quite right, certainly from our point of view, because, yes, there have been encounters between Chinese patrols and Indian patrols in the past. Yes, it is true that these patrols have been encountering each other much more frequently than before because of the fact that the infrastructure on your side is improving, infrastructure on their side has been
But
improving.
20 Indian soldiers never got killed before.
Yes. So this has not happened for several decades. I'm not even talking about a few years. It has been a very different situation from what you have faced on the Pakistan
Which is
border.
why the onus to establish trust is more on China than India.
Yes.
Let's then at this point come to that third critical relationship, India and the United States. Now, the Biden administration is not even 2 months old, and yet the Indian Prime Minister and the US President have spoken. The Indian Foreign Secretary and the US Secretary of State have had perhaps as many as 3 conversations. The US Secretary of Defense is coming to India next week. And tomorrow, the US President and the Indian Prime Minister will be meeting virtually face to face at the Quad Summit.
Yeah.
Did you expect such a good start to the relationship under Biden?
Well, in fact, I had sort of read the initial speeches by Biden, particularly the speech that he made at the State Department, where there was no mention of India actually in that very important policy speech. So I was somewhat surprised that in talking about friends and allies and partners, India did not get mentioned specifically, although there was a mention of Indo-Pacific being very important. So in that sense, what seems to have happened over the last few weeks is like a flurry of activity, which seems to be designed to project that no, this relationship is very important to the Biden administration. So from that point of view, I think this is certainly a positive development that if you see
And a pleasant surprise.
if you see the initial sort of strategic document that has come out somewhat recently, whereas in the Munich speech he had put Europe as number one in terms of what would be the priorities for US foreign policy under him. In this particular document, the focus is or the number one is in fact Indo-Pacific.
What do you think is the change, or why do you think there was a change between the speech he gave to the State Department and the sudden flurry of activity with India and the recent focus on the Indo-Pacific? Presumably, it can't be a rethinking because there's just too little time for
Not a
rethought.
rethinking, but I think there has been perhaps a sense that going forward, this is going to be the most important region for the United States of America. And also, I would say that if you see the reach out to Europe, Frankly speaking, as far as the China relationship is concerned, you will notice that expectations which the Biden administration may have had, that in view of his stress on doing things together, the alliance coming to common consensus positions, that was certainly not borne out by the speed with which Europe concluded the investment agreement with China, despite US reservations about that. So there may have been a sense that perhaps our partners in the Pacific, Indo-Pacific, are far more in a sense aware of the challenge that China poses. Maybe the Europeans are somewhat conflicted about it because of the very major economic and commercial
So not
interests involved.
rethinking, but recalibration.
That's right. I would describe it as that.
Now, something that's happened very recently is that America has announced a peace initiative to try and sort things out in Afghanistan, and they've included India. And newspaper reports, I think I'm referring to the Indian Express, suggest that this happened despite Pakistan's opposition and allegedly despite Russia's reluctance. How do you view this development?
Well, this is from the Biden administration's point of view, this makes sense because if they have determined that they want to keep to the timetable for withdrawal, which is the sense of the letter that Blinken wrote to the Afghan president, basically saying, putting him on notice that,
We will be out.
We are going out. So if that is the case, what is the best way of, in a sense, masking a withdrawal from Afghanistan? Maybe, multilateralizing it.
And therefore, India is useful in creating a cover that America needs for
that,
its withdrawal.
we have all the stakeholders who are, part of this
But this is very interesting. You're now suggesting this is not so much recognition that India has a vital role to play in Afghanistan, so much as using India along with Iran and the other countries to provide cover for America's withdrawal.
In order of influence, I would say that Pakistan, certainly Iran, these are two very key
And they're
players,
immediate neighbors.
Immediate neighbors. India certainly is very invested in Afghanistan and certainly has considerable influence, I would say, particularly amongst the old Northern Alliance.
But we're not necessarily critical to the solution.
I do not think that the Americans believe that we can deliver or we can somehow, in a sense, facilitate a
Now,
solution.
the Americans have begun talking about what they call a new inclusive government, and that presumably is one without Ashraf Ghani, who India supports, and is presumably one that includes the Taliban, who India does not support. So that is an outcome that I imagine we would have serious reservations about.
Well, we would have, and there has been, I think, perhaps a difference of opinion within government itself, and even among security analysts, whether we should actually be talking to the Taliban or not. And we have made some effort to reach out to Taliban, but from what I can see, not a very serious effort. So maybe on this.
In other words, we
okay.
haven't made up our mind very clearly whether we should or shouldn't be talking to Taliban.
Because, we have always said that it should be Afghan-owned, Afghan-led
Although we sent two
process.
unofficial advisors to a conference last year.
Yes, we did. And what is likely to happen is that Taliban will be given a sort of position within the governance system of Afghanistan without having to go through elections.
Absolutely.
Essentially, that is the deal.
And very possibly, Ghani will be out.
If that is the condition under which the Taliban is ready to join the government and cease, the current violence, then I cannot see how he can.
Now, the
continue.
interesting development is that today's newspapers report that before the American peace initiative under the UN auspices happens, where India will be involved, the Russians are organizing a conference where India is not involved. Does that disturb you or worry you? I know that Russians have organized conferences on Afghanistan in the past where we weren't involved, but just as America is trying to involve us, the Russians are keeping us on the sidelines?
Well, the Russian interest in Afghanistan is partly driven by their very close friendship and even alliance with China. So certainly they would like to keep aligned with China. Secondly, they do have an independent interest in the situation in Afghanistan because of their own, areas which are apparently the radicalization.
Before Russia broke up, it was a bordering country for Afghanistan.
That's right. So, I mean, there are those.
But are you not a bit, maybe disturbed is the wrong word, but are you not concerned by the fact that America is involving us, Russia keeps us on the sidelines?
Well, I mean, it's in a sense of optics, maybe it doesn't look so nice, but I would submit that, we do not have a very major role or significant role in terms of the political settlement of the Afghan.
In other words, our desire to be involved in the political settlement is greater than the actual role we can, in substantive terms, play.
I think that is the reality.
We're coming to the end of this interview. Look down the road for me. Over the next year or two, what do you believe will be the issues and subjects on which American and Indian interests will converge?
Well, given the fact that Biden has very clearly sort of put this out, that our greatest sort of challenge is going to be China, and in multiple dimensions. If that is the case, and if we see that Indo-Pacific is going to be a critical theater, then there is no doubt that India will be a very, very important part, as I said, of that story. So it makes sense for upgrading the relationship between US and India. We already have a very strong relationship, for example, in terms of defense, in terms of intelligence, perhaps even during the current, sort of standoff with China, perhaps there was some US support and assistance in that.
And climate change?
Well, this is where there are two issues which could be sort of vulnerabilities, because the kind of evangelical approach that somebody like John Kerry, the climate change czar who has been appointed, this will put tremendous pressure on India to sign up to commitments which may not necessarily be in India's long-term interest.
Absolutely. He will want us to sign up to commitments by fixed
For
dates.
example, he will probably say that, you should have peaking year, say for 2030 or around that time. You should join the others for 2050 being the carbon neutral year. There is a tremendous amount of pressure already building up. And you have seen recently that an effort was made to put climate change on this agenda of the UN Security Council.
Absolutely.
Saying that this is no longer just a climate change issue, it is also an international security issue.
These are all areas where we will be a little wary of the Americans.
I think there will be an issue. There will be an issue if there is a kind of a re-emphasis on multilateralism. So you will have, therefore, greater activity in the WTO, which has been almost somnolent for the last so many years. Now, in the WTO, as you know, there is a long history of India and the United States of America almost being adversaries.
That could resurface again.
It need not necessarily happen, but I'm just pointing out to you that what could be potential points of vulnerability. And the last is this tremendous and repeated stress on democracy, on democratic values, on human rights. Not so much that the administration may take positions which you will find uncomfortable, but there could be positions taken, say, for example, in the US Congress, which then may invite a reaction from our side.
Actually, why are you excluding the administration? Biden is committed to holding a summit of democracies. It's a subject on which Blinken has spoken with a fair amount of commitment, if not passion as well.
Yes.
On issues like Kashmir, India's treatment of minorities, India's treatment of dissent, India's treatment of the media, will there in fact be several awkward, embarrassing moments for our government?
There could be. There could be, depending upon what happens here in India.
Already Time magazine has suggested.
I imagine that given the other stakes that there are in the relationship, perhaps the administration may be somewhat more cautious in commenting on some of these issues. But then you cannot stop other constituencies in the United States from raising these issues. And there is, from what one can see, there is a certain prickliness about these kind of issues being raised.
Prickliness in India, on our part.
Yes.
In fact, let me put this to you, because we're getting right to the end of the thing. VDEM has in fact downgraded India as a democracy as of yesterday. Human Rights Watch has done the same thing. Time magazine wrote an article the other week to say that in fact India may not even have a role to play in the Summit of Democracies when it's held. Certainly the Washington Post has questioned whether after holding elections we continue to be one.
Karan,
Is this going to influence the Biden administration in any way?
Well, number one, we have been through this before. So I am not so worried about what the Human Rights Watch is saying, or what Amnesty International may be saying, or what the Washington Post or New York Times have been saying, because this has been a pattern in the past. So I don't think we should take too much notice of it. I would certainly be taking more notice of what happens, for example, in the US Congress, for a simple reason. It has taken a tremendous amount of effort on the part of India to actually build up a very solid bipartisan consensus in favor of strengthening of Indo-US relations. Even at the time where US politics itself was heavily polarized, there was usually a broad consensus on taking India.
That is starting to factor.
That may start fraying, and that may not be good for it.
So, the next time a foreign minister is in Washington and Premila Jayapal is going to be part of a meeting of the House Foreign Relations Committee, that mustn't be an excuse for boycotting it.
Well, I'm sure Jai Shankar must have his own reasons for doing what he has been doing. But I would certainly say, again, repeat, that my experience is that even if the administration is very well disposed, it does get influenced by what is happening in the Congress.
And he doesn't have a great majority in either house.
Right. So I think, and also I would say, you have actually built up this asset for yourself over a long period of time.
Don't squander it.
Don't let this kind of asset be in any way eroded. It's not in our interest, particularly when going forward. This relationship, not only in terms of dealing with China, but in terms of many of the other challenges which we face, including developmental challenge, including access to high technology, US is going to be a critical part.
Shyam Saram, thank you very much for a comprehensive interview.
Thank you.
Take care.
You. Always a pleasure.
Take care, stay safe.